Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers. It's the CSGO edition. I'm your host Richard Lewis. With me as always, it is the other half of the package deal. It is Duncan Thorin Shields. And obviously, there's one place to start, isn't there, Duncan, today?
Yeehaw! Well, saddle up, partner. We're here on By the Numbers with Richie Lou and Thorin.
It's unreal, isn't it, mate? I stayed up all night playing the game, and I put a video out today. For once, I beat you to it. You can see on the fucking light outside, it's like dusky. So I did stay up to do it. But I got to say, this introduction of this gun, the R8, is quite possibly one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in competitive Counterstrike history. Given that you're a historian, can you think of a gun or a patch or an imbalance or a game change that has had a more negative and weird effect on Counterstrike?
I mean, the only one that's even close is when they first released 1.6, they released it with that riot shield, which was actually usable in game. But obviously, you know, people in competitive play didn't use it. And within literally days, it had been removed or something similar like that. It lasted a very short amount of time. So that actually didn't impact pro play. Whereas obviously in the modern climate where you have tournaments every few days, if ESL hadn't stepped in, this would have actually potentially ruined a tournament starting whatever, I think tomorrow or something. So I can't think of a patch that was worse, because the thing is, obviously 1.6, we barely ever had patches. So I have to mainly go to CSGO. What's funny is I would have thought that, like, if this hadn't have happened, what this has done here, Rich, is actually expand my horizons of how bad a patch can be. So I would have said in the past that it's totally unacceptable how overpowered that CZ was when it first came out, and then when the Tech 9 was like absolutely ridiculous. Like, remember the stat when Fnatic won the major in Katowice in March this year, where Olaf Meister up to the final had more kills with a Tech 9 than a fucking AK, and the AK is the main weapon of choice for all riflers. So stuff like that's pretty bad, but this is way worse, because this is like, some of that stuff even took time to develop, you know, like the patch was bad, but people were like, let's see it in competitive play. Oh no, that is totally broken. This is like, from the second you even hear the idea, you're like, well, that sounds pretty broken. Oh, it's extremely broken. Oh, okay then.
Yeah, I mean, look, so obviously, I know you didn't really play Source, and I even played Condition Zero. So you know, I've seen some shit in my time. But in the video I made today, I compared it to dynamic weapon pricing, which was an update in Counter-Strike Source, where basically they inserted a global stock market algorithm into the game. And what this meant was that the more popular a gun was, the more frequently it was bought, the more expensive it would become. So you ended up with these situations where a Deagle and an AWP, for example, were on parity with each other because of the overpowered nature of the Deagle in Counter-Strike Source. Whereas guns like the TMP, which were an SMG, the cheapest SMG, but had a very high rate of fire and was pretty deadly in close-up situations, you could buy that in the pistol round because nobody ever used the gun. So while I'm sure that the thought process behind putting this in would be, oh, it's going to make for a new and exciting game experience every time, in terms of a competitive experience, it was fucking hideous because you couldn't afford any of the trademark guns. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. When that patch was introduced, there wasn't a CVAR in the game to take it out. You had to use it. So the competitive community came in and said, well, we're not going to allow this. We simply won't play while the game's in this state. And Valve patched in, you know, CL underscore, you know, whatever the fuck it was, dynamic weapon pricing 0, and you could take it out the game. And indeed, people took it out the game. Nobody ever used it, and nobody ever looked back. This patch, for me, is kind of on a par with that. It's that they put something in which doesn't even look to have been particularly well tested. And I'm just talking about the R8 here. The gun conceptually is a nightmare. And I find it interesting that Get Right, for example, tweeted that he saw this back in 2012. He saw this gun when he was invited to the Valve studios.
Is that like they were like? Is that like in some in something where they're trying to tease something that'll happen in the sequel, or they're trying to like, you know, that he was like, whoa, what's that? He just like he saw a door just closing, and he saw someone behind it like fire, like, and he's like, what's that? They were like, you'll find out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
well, no, I mean, it had obviously been in the game for a while. I think people had even data mined and found this out, the files were in there. Now, obviously, it never got introduced at the point. It didn't get brought in with the mainstream guns. But, Get Right says that they caught it on a screen. Valve devs were testing it out. So this isn't like a new radical concept they've just dropped for Christmas. This is obviously a gun they've been thinking about bringing in for a long time. And to see it get brought in this state, where not only is it overpowered, not only does it have ridiculous armor penetration, so it's a one-shot kill at chest level, not only does it do ridiculous amounts of damage anyway, regardless of armor penetration, not only is it fully accurate while moving, if you use the left-click charge, it's still pretty accurate at close range with the right-click, and it's basically an instant kill weapon. Now, you factor all of this in, and you think, well, someone's going to notice that this is overpowered, but fine, okay, maybe you need to play a few games. Then you can shoot with it while you're defusing. So you can mask the sound of a defuse by spamming the gun or making the opponent think you're off the defuse. How that gets through such a vital component of Counterstrike, I don't know. And in that you can even shoot in spawn, in the sort of buy time with it, if you right click. So there's a lot of bugs with it. It's not just that it's imbalanced, it's actually buggy. And it just looks really poorly planned and rushed out. And I never criticize Valve. I never criticize anyone really trying to make changes to the game, because I know how whiny any community can be about any change whatsoever. But this is awful. This is really awful. In fact, actually, what I'm going to do is, just while you chip in and give your points, Sam, I gave you a clip to play people. If you can run that clip. And basically, this just shows how overpowered it is. It's a clip that was on Reddit from Cobble. But again, Duncan, I mean, just a few more thoughts about this gun specifically.
I mean, the biggest problem for me is that, like I kind of mentioned before, in the past, even the CZ and Tech9 ones, it's like the reason you never knew how overpowered they were is it sort of took people like JW to show you, oh, this is where it's super overpowered. This point in a pro game is unacceptable. Or Envious would use it in this way, and now we can see that, it's one thing if a gun's overpowered on its own, but now when you have 3 people who use the weapon and they use it tactically, it becomes super overpowered. What's worse about this is, actually, I never needed to see this played. Once I read what the stats were and what it did, I was like, this is impossible. This can be balanced. I'll tell you, here we go. Let's just start at the basics, okay? So I tell you, there's a weapon that is a pistol that costs $850 and can kill someone with armor in his chest with 1 bullet. Doesn't matter. Don't go any further. There is no possible way you can implement that weapon so that it is a good addition. As in, you might think, no, but be reasonable. For example, obviously, we wouldn't make it really easy to aim and accurate and all the rest of it. Well, why is that good? Why are you making weapons that can kill someone in 1 shot, but now you're actually boasting that they're inaccurate? So you're actually making it so skill isn't even a factor in killing someone. And in fact, the worst player in the world could trip over, smash his dick on the toaster, and accidentally press mouse 2 and kill someone with it. That's not the best player in the world he could kill, by the way. So that's a terrible scenario before we even get in the server. Secondly, one aspect that people aren't thinking about is, think about how bad it is when anyone who vaguely understands the concept of a gun goes medium to close range, runs using mouse 2, and just sort of circles around you since it has good accuracy while moving. It doesn't have good accuracy, but you can get it into the chest. Okay, we need to kill them. They are gonna get the kill if you don't kill them within the first, let's say, 4 or 5 bullets. Right? That's one person. Now imagine that's Flusher, and then JW's got one as well, and then Olofmeister's got one, and the 3 of them are all going to run out while you're stood there with 2 rifle guys. The odds that you kill all 3, bearing in mind they've also nerfed spraying and tapping and bursting, are going to be really bad. So you can see immediately how it's not only bad now, it's going to get worse. Like, it's going to get even worse once the pros get their hands on it. And luckily, at the moment, at least, that's delayed, because that would be a nightmare, I think.
I've also been told, and I haven't been able to confirm this myself in mine and Sam's gameplay sessions last night, but I'm told by a few people that it's got an aim accuracy bug where if you hold down right click and then click left, it kind of insta-cocks the gun and it's still 100% accurate. So
I'll test that out as soon as the show's over, Rich. I'll test that out.
Yeah, I mean, I
gotta
think
climb a few racks.
Yeah. Hopefully, maybe I shouldn't say these things. People get upset, but the only way we're going to get this patched is obviously by talking about it. So I'm really perplexed at this, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I even missed out the cost being such a dramatic factor in it. You know, in every game I played last night, sure, there was a little bit of curiosity for the first hour or two. You want to try out the new gun. Everyone's laughing. Haha, it's so overpowered. Ha ha ha. But no one really believes it's going to be that bad. Then you start trying to play normally, and everything else has been nerfed, apart from this overpowered R8 gun that's just been introduced. And literally every game ended the same way. No point in buying rifles anymore. It's not worth the money. You may as well stick to the R8 and just run around and, like you say, wild, wild west that motherfucker. That was what everybody was doing. I must have played like, you know, fucking for 8 hours or something. It was just...
You know what, Rich? One thing I always like to do, just to maintain my own level of intellectual honesty, is I try to put myself in the position of the other person who's arguing their points. I try to think, what could they put? I try to reverse engineer it. Let's not assume they're an idiot, okay? Let's assume they had some good rationale behind it. They had a motivation and intention that meant something. And let's try and reverse engineer a way it could be good. Now, I tried using game-specific stuff in CS, and like I said, I couldn't find it. For example, if you make the gun that powerful and that cheap, then it'd have to be extremely inaccurate, which again is not a good thing, actually. Why are you putting extremely inaccurate guns in the game but promoting people to use them? Again, I can't get to a reason. I keep thinking. And finally, at the very end of it all, Rich, I realized one way that Valve is trying to change the world. Okay. So you know what happened? Here's what happened, okay? In the Valve headquarters, they were looking, and actually they have a secret room. It's sort of like that room that Ozymandias has in his base, where it's got like television monitors from all around the world, you know, because Valve realized that CS is basically life, you know. So they're just tracking what goes on in the world, and they make updates in the game to try and reflect what's happening in real life and maybe change the world in a subtle kind of way. So what they figured out was they saw every day another shooting in America, another shooting in a school in America. Oh, God, every day, just shootings all in schools. And what they realized was the problem is, Rich, these kids are going and they're getting their dad's AR rifle, an automatic rifle, okay, which is extremely good. You can fire like 30 rounds a second or something. So what they did, Rich, is to promote, they remember the old stories from the media, you know, scumfucks like ESPN who now want to get in on esports. They remember all those guys telling us that apparently video games make people violent and train them how to kill. So what they did is they want to make less school shootings because now kids are going to go in with their great-great-granddaddy's old revolver that's all rusty. They're going to try and run while spamming and fanning the trigger, and they're not going to get that many people. They're going to get taken down in time because in real life, tapping and bursting haven't been nerfed on the rifles.
Oh my God. What have you done?
It's good, right? It's a good analogy.
What have you done?
Literally triggered. Triggered.
That's unreal. But I mean, I suppose we do have to clutch at straws that ridiculous to try and find something good about the weapon. I'm at a loss. I guess rather because there's so much to talk about in the patch anyway. Let's just sort of wrap up the R8 talk and I mean it's got. What would you do to nerf it? Do you think it will be nerfed radically? And some people are even calling for it to be removed from the game. I don't think there's any chance of that. But
unfortunately, we know Valve don't remove guns from the game, so that's over. Not least because, remember, Counterstrike, here's the problem people are getting into. You guys think Counterstrike is a 5v5 first-person shooter game which emphasizes skill and tactics to overcome the enemy, including planting of bombs and killing enemies. No. Counterstrike is a series of models walking down a catwalk that have new skins on them that you buy and that Valve make money off. That's the business of Counterstrike. It's not about any of the thing I said. That's the front. That's the aspect you think of the game. The game now is about having guns, having skins, having cases. So there's almost no chance a gun, as far as I can tell, will ever be removed. The best chance is to nerf. And so in terms of nerfing, I had some ideas. So first of all, no matter what, the gun should probably cost more money. Like it should probably be more in the SMG range, like, you know, by 1,200, 1,300. Because then at least if you do die without getting a kill, you really impact your economy. The idea that it's only a little bit more than a deagle is ridiculous. Secondly, another thing you can do is, first things first, before I change anything else on that gun, I'm going to massively nerf armor penetration, because why should it kill with one hit to the chest? Like, here's the thing. Even 2 hits to the chest, you'd have a bunch of times you'd get the two bullets off, you kill a guy with but at least you have to land 2. At the moment, you can spam all 8 bullets. You just have to land 1 out of the 8 and still be alive, and you'll get the kill. It's almost certain, you know. So that's another thing. Make the armor pen different. And then, I mean, here's a weird thing. I almost feel like there's no point in having the mouse 1 action. Just make mouse 2, mouse 1 action, and make that the point of the gun. The point of the gun is to sort of slightly inaccurately spam at people, hope you get kills. But since we're going to make the armor pen less, you have to tag a couple, maybe make it so that like a slight accuracy deficiency while moving. Sorry, not that accurate, but I mean, as in mainly the area I would see you using this gun is you stand at one spot and you hope, for example, on Banana on Inferno that they run in and you're just going to spam that area and you're going to get bullets into people, but you're not going to be aiming very well. And the idea is the other guy in the site's going to try and clean them up. Like, at least it's a strategy to that. It's not too overpowered. See, I'm trying to find ways to make it have an actual use in the game because I can't remove it, you know.
This is what I was kind of looking at, and you know, I think there are now some parts of certain maps that are unplayable, and it's really strange because, you know, these are parts of the maps that Valve have identified as already being problematic for terrorists. So Banana on Inferno is the classic example, and I would say, given that it was difficult to get up anyway due to smokes and Molotovs and whatever, it was pretty easy to hold. You could get an AWP to car. There was all these classic ways of defending Banana. Even on an eco, you know, it's a closed, very tight choke point. So pistol spam can work and reap dividends. You know, even at the pro level, this isn't just matchmaking I'm talking about. So Valve was sort of cognizant of that fact, and they were like, well, maybe we need to look at that map and make it wider. Well, now to introduce a gun that just makes it, seriously, it was a bloodbath. We played a couple of Inferno games, and it was an absolute bloodbath. It was impossible to get up Banana. It was just too much. You know, it was even with, you know, Molotovs to the cars, nades to the cars. 2 people with that fucking gun, the R8, could really just do a number on you. And I agree with you. I think it should be way more inaccurate, not have the armor penetration, and it should be almost like you're tactically, whoever buys that gun is the sacrificial lamb. You've got to hold an angle. And as they come round, you've got to try and get off as many shots as you can before you die. Do as much damage as you can, and then it's up to a nade or a crossfire or, you know, the other person who's there with you to sort of mop up the kills. It shouldn't be that you can literally just go full fucking Dirty Harry and get a 5-man, which is like what's happening in close proximities on the map. You know, any apps, you know, Mirage, it's just too much. It's way too much. And of course, on top of that, there was a lot of other changes in the patch. Now, I did a video and I talked about how I didn't mind some of the changes, but I seem to be in a minority. A lot of people are very upset about some of the other changes. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about the nerfs to the rifle they've introduced, which again, to nerf rifles while you introduce a gun this overpowered, to do it simultaneously, that's what makes this patch seem so bizarre. But now when they've reduced overall accuracy of crouching, they've reduced overall accuracy of like second bullets. First bullet accuracy still fine, and long distance spraying has been reduced, but even close proximity burst fire, the second, third, fourth bullet before you get into that sort of full recoil is all reduced as well overall. So there's an overall reduction of accuracy of rifles, which seems bizarre given that many people have been complaining about the rifles not being accurate enough in recent videos.
No, that's exactly my problem, is that, I mean, the whole spray thing I could get into in a different aspect, because I actually feel like when you buff those things, that you can then buff spraying as well, because it will never be as effective as being an amazing aimer who uses tapping and bursting, because you will just get the kill faster because you'll aim for the head, burst and tap, and you will get the headshot, whereas the guy spraying always has to transfer the spray onto you anyway. So I could make an argument that I think those two things are connected in a way, that actually as you buff one, if you buff the other, it still has a balance to it. But I definitely think one of the things CSGO has always struggled for is a lack of the tapping and bursting accuracy being really good while standing still. Because as soon as you do that, what will happen is, first of all, everyone will have to a degree, learn that technique. So it will promote more skilled play. But secondly, players like Well, let's just think of the obvious ones. Olofmeister, Shocks. These guys will become even better than they are now. And in a way that makes sense, as in you're using their skill to make them even better. They're not using their skill to also gamble with sort of a running while shooting spray algorithm and just hope that they get slightly luckier. No, you're actually allowing them to just show off how fantastically skilled they are, which will just be better for the game in general. So it is bizarre to me that you would take those aspects away. Like, what's funny is, Richard, today I was set... Lurpus, who hasn't played the game yet, was just reading through all the different things and looking at the videos. Okay, so he was saying like, oh, I see how fucked up the R8 is. But then he naively said, because he'd read Reddit, where a lot of people thought this, like, oh, but at least, I can see like a merit to improving tapping versus spraying. And I actually said, well, actually, they've actually nerfed that as well, just ever so slightly. And Shocks, bless his soul, actually came in and said, no, they have made it better. Tapping and burst. It's like they haven't, right? What's happening is it's true. It's negligible, the nerf. But the problem is you're only realizing you're thinking it's better because everything else is so much worse that you're exclusively using this. And because you're a fantastic player, you think it's good. Like it's the other way, mate.
But I was getting wrecked. Like I streamed some CSGO. And I was getting wrecked because like I like to play that tap-in style and that burst style. I don't like to spray at long distance. That that for me, when you get into that realm, it should be a lottery whether you hit the shot or not. The person who taps and keeps their cool should win the duels at long range at least. Obviously, I'm not saying there's no place for spraying in the game. I'm not saying learning recoil patterns isn't a skill. Of course, that is true. But the reality is that for me is what an aim-based game is about, in its purest form. And you're right. I played this and I was like going, oh well, at least they've got bursting and tapping back. I was having a lot of joy with rifles at long distance. I was like, yeah, this is pretty sweet actually. At least they've done that. Well, actually, looking at the numbers, it's like you say, it's just a negligible nerf where everything else has been reduced so bad that it's like tapping has now took a step forward because everything else has been pushed so far behind it.
What's great is, Rich, I've got another analogy for you here, okay? So what's great about that scenario is I saw lots of people on Reddit saying, no, tapping is better now. And what's great is that Sloth Squadron guy, who's a guy who literally, like, he runs their numbers on this shit, he finds out all the... I think he must have some coding background because he actually understands, like, the mechanisms of how the coding stuff's gone wrong, like on the armor pen, way better than anyone I've heard. So when he was talking about, he literally has the numbers and he shows that the numbers gotten worse for the inaccuracy while firing for the AK, etc., for example, right? But what's funny is since most people, like I said, because the rest of it all went to shit, they're all thinking it's better. It reminds me of that bit in 1984 where the guy who's the main character's job is he works in like the Ministry of Information or something like that. And one of his things he does is whenever there's like bad news, the way that they'll spin it is, so say chocolate rations have actually gone down, they'll just claim that it used to be even less and it's gone up ever so slightly. That's what it feels like on this. So now people are like, well, they have improved tapping and burst. Like, well, they haven't. There's actually no positive to this, guys.
Whether they'll change that or not, I don't think the rifle alterations will change. I think that they'll stand the test of time and people will have to adapt and get used to them. And I agree with you. I think overall nerfing like long distance spraying is a good move for the game. I don't want to see spray duels the distance of long and whichever recoil pattern jumps up to get the headshot first be the winner of that. I don't want to see that. So I want tapping. I want bursting. That's what I think requires more skill. That's just me. But the one thing I think we can all get on board is the pistol alterations, where what they've done is they have doubled the moving inaccuracy. So if you're strafing around with a pistol, it's now as doubly as inaccurate as it was before. The only thing I would say is that because they've done that for every pistol, it still makes buying the Tech 9 for that particular force buy run and gun style. It still makes it the optimal buy. Whereas I would have said the Tech 9 probably needed a bit of special attention. It's the most accurate gun still while running. It was the most accurate pistol, I should say, rather, while running still. But I think this whole sort of gunning style with the pistols, the force buys, I think we could see that was a problem in the game anyway. There was more ecos and force buy rounds being won in CSGO than there has been in any other version of Counterstrike, which makes it exciting for the spectators. But again, I don't think that should necessarily be happening if we're talking about competitive integrity in its purest form.
I mean, the pistol aspect's one that I've got a video I'm going to release right after this show where that's the one I go into the most, actually, the other aspect of the pistols, because I think that's like an aspect of understanding, again, not just the gun in isolation, but how it works in the hierarchy of all guns and how it would be used in a round. Because that's one of the areas where I think Valve make the most slip-ups, as you saw by making all these OP pistols, which then, to a degree, have made like full buy rounds less important now. So as a result, to me, that was already way off. So there are some aspects where there's like positives and negatives to what they've done here. But yeah, I think in general, we've covered most of the stuff in the patch for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, do you think this is, I mean, what are Valve going to do? I mean, are they going to come out and like, are they going to admit that maybe, for example, like the R8 or other elements of this patch were bad, maybe roll it back, revert it, change things? Because this is pretty bad. I mean, this is even being talked about in the mainstream gaming press as being a ridiculous patch. Front page of the subreddit. There isn't any positive argument. There's no real counter argument. And I know Valve, in their minds, probably have one. And they never tell us. They never tell the community what it is. But I just cannot see how they can stand by this patch with anything other than maybe a whoops, our bads. You know,
I mean, this is an example, right, where we've had these discussions so many times in esports, but I think you have to go back to it. There's two ways that I think CS has to go if you ever want CS to be a really good competitive game. Either one, there has to be a version for pros and a version for casuals, which you can see no modern developer wants because they want the pros to be playing the casual mode. So that's off the table. So to me, the only other real option to make things positive going forwards is you've got to have really high-level thinkers about Counter-Strike involved in the development. Now, that might mean pros, but it also might mean people like ex-pros or like, for example, this Sloth Squadron guy clearly knows a lot more about understanding some of the balance values than people at Valve. So he's not a pro player. He's not ever been involved in but he's someone where he's an obvious community person you'd put forwards to at least be involved in it, to give them feedback, if not, in an ideal world, Ice Frog-esque, actually lead some of the development concepts. And the idea is you'd have someone very knowledgeable or who has a very consistent, coherent idea of what CS should be. At least they would lead the development, as in they'd say, this is the direction we're going to go. And then, yes, some other guy would design the weapon and some other guy would code it. But at least the core design concepts is what would be given over to like this sort of a person. Because, I mean, this is an example of where it's the year that's killing me here, Rich. We're almost in 2016 here. Yeah. CSGO came out in like the middle of 2012. Like that's more lifespan than a lot of esports games have ever had. So there's no more of that shit of like, well, just give them time. Valve is listening and they're trying to improve the game and it gets better every year. That doesn't work anymore. I've told this story in the past, but at the beginning of CSGO, when the beta wasn't even out, I was asked, I actually wrote a column that was quite scathing about it. And I said, like, conceptually, I can't see how this is going to work. Looking at the people who are behind it, how's it going to be as good a game as 1.6? You know, all these things. And one of the things that happened was Torble, the guy who was one of the owners of ESEA, was actually in contact with Valve. And so he contacted me and said, you know what? Some of the Valve people have actually read your column. So here's the thing. Why don't you be positive, which is like a ridiculous way to phrase it, but that's just the way assholes are. So he said, why don't you be positive and find a way to suck this dick? No, he said, what? I said, be positive and tell us some things that they could do to improve it. Like, for example, could you recommend some pro players they could talk to? So I said, I'll do you one better than that, mate. And I went away and I made a dream team list of 20 names who I think would be like perfect to do the game. And I made this list and it was like Element, Potty, like Executor, Markelov, fucking Kogu, All It Fraud, Veslan, BDS. It was like community members, famous in-game leaders, famous people who in the game were very intelligent in the game, people who revolutionized certain firing techniques. I got all this. I got this dream team, and I got my whole dream team, Rich. I got the whole list. I made a little paragraph explaining who each person was. This person pioneered bursting with the rifles in 2003. You know, all the information I put down. I had their email contacts, their Skype contacts. I sent it off to Torble. And then a few months later, I said, so whatever happened? Like, what did Valve think of that list? And he said, oh, they've decided not to use that list. They're just going to talk to the pros when they meet him at IEM New York. There you go. And here's the game we've got 4 years later.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if if you'd had that dream team, we would have ended up with a better game necessarily. What I do know is it is frustrating when you are told to sort of, hey, don't just criticize, give us feedback. And when you take all that time to put together something, and in its constructive feedback, you it gets ignored. I mean, more often than not, it gets ignored. And that's what I found about games developers in general. This isn't just a Valve unique problem. They talk about feedback, but of course they have to have an artistic vision, or a vision that isn't influenced, that can't be swayed. Otherwise, it's like the old Henry Ford quote, isn't it? If I'd built what people had asked for, I'd have made faster horses. I would have never have made the automobile. I kind of am sympathetic, but again, even I agree that the development of the game in terms of pro feedback wasn't handled great in the early stages. It was something that got better. And you're right, we probably could be further forward in terms of games balance.
But that's what tilts me, is this notion that, again, if you say, I don't like the way you're fucking me in the ass, they go, oh, well, you're just totally biased against the concept. No, I don't like the way you're doing it, is what I'm saying. What you're doing and the way you're doing it. I'm not saying that you can't do anything. So actually, in this particular scenario, what I'm saying is I'd hate the way that if you're someone who doesn't like updates that are bad, we're not talking about updates that are good, bad updates, then you're labeled as like some Luddite who can't move with the times and change and who wants the game to be the way it was 10 years ago. No. What's funny is I used to say this at the end of 1.6. There's a lot of things in 1.6 I didn't like, and I would like them to make things better and to move towards a more skilled game. So I want changes, but I want them to be ones that make sense and that actually add something to the game and exploit people's skill more. So as a result, I would actually be in favor of changing many things in CSGO. I could even though I'm not a big fan of it in terms of esports, see changing the game enough that like it would be radically different year to year. But if you're going to do that, it has to be with like a clear rationale behind why you're doing it. At the moment, the reasoning that they give for each of the aspects not only often doesn't make sense, but then you look at it in practice and it often doesn't do what they say.
There's one thing we missed out on, and then we'll definitely move away from patch talk. But obviously there was the changes to the defuse time and round time. And apparently these are going to be implemented in majors. Valve are going to now have a 1 minute 55 round time, so almost 2 minutes, and a 40-second bomb timer, which is 10 seconds increase and a 5-second increase, respectively, from the traditional competitive rule set. And I believe the rationale for this is that they want to counter the effectiveness of the smoke and Molotovs stopping and shutting down pushes by giving the Ts an extra amount of time. What I don't get is if everybody accepted we need to kind of make it a bit more T-sided overall the game, why they then immediately balance that change by giving an additional 5 seconds for CT defuses, which I don't know how much it'll impact on the pro scene, but just in terms of matchmaking, that's fucking retarded, because getting people not to peek when the bomb is planted is a fucking mission in itself. When you're playing with like 4 dudes from Russia who think that the macho thing to do is to just like run out and get the kill when the bomb's planted, there's 5 of you alive, there's only 1 guy left, they'll happily run at that guy one by one. And of course, having that extra 5 seconds on the fucking defuse timer for them is a real fucking problem. So it's going to make matchmaking suck for sure. Retakes are going to be a more common occurrence. But what do you think it'll do to the competitive scene? And what do you think about these changes overall?
Yeah, my big issue with that is, on one level, you could see a world in which having more time could allow more strategical evolution. Great, that's great. But in reality, that's not the way it'll be used. People will continue to do what they do now, sit and wait till 30 seconds. And so actually it will make the game more boring for viewers to watch. Secondly, the actual bomb timer. I think
Simon, just before you finish your point, sorry, I've completely got this wrong. I knew I'd done that. It's 5 seconds off in matchmaking, so ignore that point. Although I'm happy to burn Russians at any day of the week. But yeah, so yeah, it's actually a reduction, which is helpful for matchmaking, but it's an increase in competitive, which does make it more CT-sided for competitive play. So sorry, continue.
Yeah, the problem with the bomb timer is that actually makes it so that doing ballsy fakes now gets rewarded less. They have more time to come and rotate over anyway. So being that genius CT side that makes the correct call to rotate the guy isn't rewarded as much. Being the guy on terrorist who fakes them out and goes to the other side isn't rewarded as much. I can't see how that's a positive, actually. Yes, someone who's a god at clutches will win more clutches, but that's not really... The problem is everyone else will win more clutches as well. So in my way, to me, that's some negative, the timer issue in terms of the bomb timer one. The round timer one isn't as much of an issue. I just don't see practically how it will be exploited well, unfortunately, even though in an abstract sense it could be good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lot of people were sort of messaging me about it and saying that you shouldn't do this. It's going to create all sorts of problems with the competitive scene. Like, I would want to at least see it in action first. I mean, this is the one thing I will say. Those kind of changes I don't mind so much, because people are talking about, oh, smoke's overpowered, so nerf smokes, like cut down how long they last. Valve will never do a direct nerf in that way. That isn't their balanced philosophy. What they do is they're like, why do you think smokes are overpowered? And they're like, well, you know, if you do, you can shut down a last minute push with one smoke. And they go, okay, well, what if we give you more time to push, and maybe the CTs are kind of forced to use the smokes a bit earlier? That's how they think about things. They try and think outside the box rather than directly nerf what people are complaining about, which I suppose it's an admirable philosophy when it works. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But I'll always give them the benefit of the doubt on that. You know, I'd much rather experiment with minor changes and see how they play out competitively, rather than just be like, not change anything at all. So anyway, that's the patch summary. I guess we can get into the Fragbite Masters talk before we do the news roundup. I don't know how much of the Fragbite Masters you got to watch. I caught drips and drabs. Did you watch all of the games?
I didn't watch the SK-TSM one, but I watched the other ones.
Okay.
Ex-TSM.
Well, I mean, it was another game that threw up some sort of interesting result, shall we say. I think the big take-home is TSM and their failure to get to a final. When, again, out of the 4 teams, NIP, SK Gaming, Fnatic, TSM, you're looking at that and you're like, well, it's got to be a Fnatic TSM final. Certainly what ended up happening was we got Fnatic versus TSM, where they were beaten, I would say comfortably, by Fnatic on Cash and Mirage, 2-0. And Olaf Meister, Dennis, Flusher, all looking great. Then you're like, okay, well, they've got SK Gaming now. There's no way they can lose to a team that is, disjointed, because obviously the pimp thing was in the pipeline. We'll come to that in a second. So they're playing with somebody who is already knows he's out the door. You've got Modi in there, who's not really doing too well at the moment, and he's still finding his feet in CSGO. But this defeat was just unbelievable for them to lose to SK Gaming, and let's be clear, that included a 16-2. So I don't know what the fuck is going on with TSM right now.
I mean, it's definitely. I mean, the most bizarre thing about that series as well was the map they lost 16-2 on was their pick. They actually picked Cash. And Cash was also the map they'd lost to Fnatic on. Now, what's funny is I had made this point recently that one of the reasons why I thought teams like Envious could still be very good is because they're very good on Cash. And you notice almost every top team has gone away from it. VP, Fnatic, everyone had gone away from it previously. And TSM used to be pretty decent on that. And when they first started to rise up around April of this year, that was like within their map pool of what they would play within the 3 maps. And they would usually be decent enough. They could win or have close losses. Clearly, the team's in complete shambles. The pick ban's gone completely shit as well. Like, they're picking that map as well. Like, let's just think about this for a second. So in the series against the SK guys, SK removed Dust 2, and as a result, the question mark team picked Cash out of everything available. So think of all the maps they've been strong on recently. They made Train very good, but SK was going to pick Train. Mirage has been one that's been strong from them in the past. Inferno's always been good, but they did get wrecked by Luminosity. I mean, they even removed Inferno themselves. Something's gone wrong with this team. Like, to me, people have driven that whole confidence thing so much into the ground because they use it when they're a shithead NiP fan who wants to believe that the only reason NiP isn't going 87-0 again is because, like, Freiburg just lost confidence being in the best entry fragger. Not to do with the fact he's just not even vaguely the best entry fragger anymore. But the problem is, this is the example of confidence killing you, because they're not even picking the maps they're good on. They only have Dust 2 now. They're not confident in any other map. They're going with weird picks, weird bans, and now they're losing to like the third best team from their country. So you can see this is the players at the absolute rock bottom of confidence. This is the team is completely disjointed. And as we discussed on the past episode, it seems like they don't even have faith in the in-game leader to pick the maps that he knows they're strong on. And so as a result, you're in this world where, you're going to shit completely.
I mean, I think the problem, I don't even know if I want to label it confidence. This is where an in-game leader's got to take a team, by the fucking balls. You got to take charge, right? And Carrigan's capable of doing that, no doubt about it. But this lineup are basically pressurizing him into making these bizarre drafting choices. He is doing this draft democratically. He is listening to his team, and there's members in the team who don't want to play maps that the team are good on, which is absurd. When you get into a situation where TSM had one of the best records online on train, and they get to PGL, and we're like, okay, well, this is the real test. You got to play Virtus Pro. They beat Virtus Pro on train. You're like, okay, could be a fluke. They do it again. You're like, all right, they're mustard on train, no doubt about it. And then obviously with what happened at the major against NIP, which is just one of those freakish anomaly results that you've just got to take on the chin. And let's not forget, it wasn't like your preparation was optimal with all the bullshit that was going on in the background. The fact that your manager is effectively fired just before the major, and everybody knows about it, and he knows about it, and maybe you're going to be looking for another team. You can let that one slide. Instead of letting that one slide, they're now saying we don't play train anymore. We will not pick train, one of our strongest maps, which is just a ridiculous situation. And that's not confidence. That is almost like, I don't know. I cannot understand. That's where a leader just has to come in and say, I know best. If you don't fucking like it, there's the fucking door. This isn't how it works in this team. We're good on train. Shut the fuck up. Stick to the system. Stick to the program. And we're going to win games on train. Well, they're not doing that. And it's like you say, the pick ban is now all over the place as a result of the fact that they are allowing basically an argument every time about what maps are strong. And there's nobody who's got veto power. And it has to be the in-game leader. Otherwise, what's the point? So I'm astounded to see them in a situation where they're picking cash because they don't want to pick train. SK pick train. They get battered on train. And yet you've won your opponent's pick as TSM and you've still lost the series against a team that has been thrown together, has a revolving door policy, and let's be real, doesn't even have that high amount of skill in the lineup. So real
you have to be real. In that series, Freeze had like the game of his life. Remember, Freeze is not some young player who hasn't had his chance to show us. He's been playing CSGO the whole time since like DreamHack Winter 2012 onwards. Every tournament he can. He's been in teams constantly. He's been to majors. He's been in decent team. He's not a top player. He's a decent AWPer who's long since past his prime. So unless he's going to magically go on some climb back to the top again, this is just the series of his life. Great. But it's the whole trend that TSM's losing these series now. And to me, the most shocking one is to just lose to Fnatic. Because remember, Fnatic was the team you had the number of that used to wreck all the time. And now they're just schooling you. So yeah, it's all of it combined. It's just, they're in a terrible place right now. Now, who knows? Maybe getting the new org will start to put that stuff in place. But I mean, it's definitely been a gradual downward slide when you look at the major onwards.
So let's talk about the new org. I mean, I got some ideas, but the problem with talking about those on by the numbers is people think this is reporting, not broadcasting, not entertainment. People think this is my reporting. So every time I say, oh, JW did have talks with, well, or rather NIP had talks about maybe bringing JW in from Fnatic, and that definitely happened. But, let's not put it in print because it's a bit of something and nothing, and, whatever. People go, yeah, well, he said JW was going to go to NIP and he was wrong. So Richard Lewis just makes things up. So I can't even be asked talking about the things I've heard because it just gets to a stage where, every retard wants to fucking, you know what I mean? Like as if I staked my life on it rather than said, this is what's going on. This is the word on the street. These are the rumors, and I'm presenting them to you for you to make up your own mind. And here's what I believe makes more sense. So I'm just not going to bother with that. But what I will say is, it's definitely not going to be Optic.
Okay.
I'm really confused about that, because that seemed like the logical choice. I mean, we can say that TSM. I mean, you can just follow what happened on Twitter. You know, everyone starts following each other on Twitter. They're having flights out there and stuff. They definitely had talks with Optic. The channels of communication were open. And I don't think it's going to be Optic anymore.
I mean, wasn't the strong implication that it was Team Secret by the fact their name's a fucking question mark? They kept saying, like, it's a secret. Like it made it seem like very obvious, right?
Yeah, but I mean, so then you think that, right? But then, you know, obviously there's some fundamental problems with that. I mean, Team Secret in itself isn't necessarily like, it's not a traditional organization.
No, but I know they wanted a CSGO team.
Yeah, they definitely did. Everyone does at the moment. So, you know, Team Secret is, you know, made up of, it was kind of like a super group of, you know, players that came from other Dota 2 teams. I know that they had some links to GGA. Alex Garfield publicly said that they were, you know, involved in looking after them, I guess, helping them with sponsors and stuff. So you have that. Now, for me, you know, yeah, maybe you do bring in a CSGO team. That would be the one that kind of makes sense based on all the hints that have been dropped. But it's not an organization in the classical sense. And it'd be very
but to the players, though, I think that's good, because the whole thing of Team Secret is the idea it's the players org, where you get all the things your way and who's there to argue because you're the players and you sort of, to a degree, run it. I mean, supposedly there's some sort of backer who's like some rich guy who's like into, I guess, was a fan of the players or something. But I could see people like TSM, who obviously have been complaining, or at least dropping hints over the year, they didn't like the way their previous org treated them. This would be where maybe they would think that's good. Because you have to remember, a lot of players right now don't give a fuck about the concept of orgs. They don't want to be in SK, Fnatic, these old orgs, because now you're almost paying the org to be in the org with how much money the orgs are making from all this sort of shit. So to them, they're more just like, listen, you give me a really good cut of the stickers and I don't give a fuck about the rest. You know, pay my flights, give me this cut and sticker, and it'll all work itself out. That's how I think a lot of players think right now.
Yeah. I mean, and sort of getting back to the whole issue with, you know, the TSM, they've left an organization that was pretty much primed to be in the Turner League. And now the question, and this is what I'm saying, this is why a lot of people said, well, why haven't Turner, and again, we'll talk about Turner in a bit, but why hasn't the Turner League announced all of the teams yet? Why don't we have an idea? And it's because you get situations like this where it's like TSM representation was at the Turner meeting. Things are looking good that they're going to have a team in there. Well, now TSM doesn't have a CSGO team. Now, for the interests of the league, they want that team of, you know, Carrigan and Device and all of those guys. They want that team to be playing in that league, whichever organization they go to. But equally, the business relationship, the business side of things, the discussions have been had with TSM. So it creates these issues. Like, how do we... TSM are scrambling to get a CSGO team so they can be involved in the Turner League. You know, there's talk... you know, they're even talking to, like, teams like Conquest, apparently. If you can get your head around that, you know, to go from, like...
That's
TSM
the worst thing, Richard. Based on the things I'm hearing, TSM will be getting an NA CSGO team, and spoiler, it will not be one of the good ones, and it will be made up of players who right now have probably never had a good placing in their lives, except if they were on Cloud9 a long time ago. Anyway, continue.
Yeah.
So it'll be a dog shit team, by the way, not a million times within realm of this team. I have no chance of being close to this team.
No, and that's what I mean. So it's a come down in terms of the organization, but of course, the important thing is to have a placeholder team, and you can maybe bring a better team in or tweak the team you've got. You know, that makes sense. It's very hard to get into CSGO now at a high level if you're an organization that didn't get in earlier, because everyone's on good contracts. Everyone's making, well, not everyone, but, you know, the top teams are on good contracts. They're making good money. You can't just swoop in and snatch those away. Relationships have been established and people have done the groundwork. TSM letting that Danish team go is a fucking It's a disaster, in my opinion. It's one of the worst bits of
mismanagement. If they actually care about CSGO, like let's say, for example, things don't go that well, and eventually in 2 or 3 years, who knows, CSGO might not be here. TSM might not care about CSGO in a few years. Let's say that happens. Okay, fair enough. It won't be that big a deal. But if CSGO keeps getting bigger, if it ever gets bigger than League of Legends in all respects, and if the esports side shifts there and TSM eventually put a lot of their resources in, this will be one of the biggest fuck-ups they have ever done in their org, letting this team get away from them. Just for the amount of money and investment it would take to get a better team at this point in time, which they're not going to do, and they will end up. Here's what's funny. TSM is about to do to themselves what all the other big esports orgs did when League of Legends came along. The other orgs would not invest into the best teams because they didn't want to pay massive salaries because they thought it was inflated in League of Legends that it would all come down. Of course, it never came down. It only got bigger and bigger as the game got so huge, it eclipsed all other games, and therefore teams like SK were left a million miles behind, and they didn't have the best teams. Teams like Na'Vi don't even have a team. Meanwhile, teams like CLG and TSM, who were just a dude in his bedroom who played the game and made streaming money, overtook all of these orgs and now have insanely good resources and money and sponsorships, magnitudes beyond all the teams I just mentioned who used to run this whole esports scene. So what will happen is the reverse will happen to TSM. They're in position now to be the best in any game they want because of the resources they have, and they've blown it for CSGO, and it looks to me as though it's going to be at least a few years before they're going to be in a position again where they're going to be back with an elite level team, and so CSGO won't be relevant for them. It'll just be to play in an NA league, and if all you care about is making money, great, have a presence there, do that. I think there should be something more to life than making money because you can make money and be excellent. I realize people like TSM wouldn't be aware of that, though.
So let's get back to the Fragbite Masters. So obviously the TSM was the big talking point. I think they need to really settle down, get an organization, get another tournament under their belt, and the sleeper must awaken in the form of Carrigan and take charge. The other story that was kind of simmering away there was, of course, NIP. And they had a pretty good innings. You know, they beat SK 2-0. They got a win over Fnatic. And then lost to Fnatic in the final, but did take a map. They were in with a shout in the final. It wasn't it wasn't like it was a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. But of course, the storyline that comes out of there was it was actually Arlu's last tournament with NIP. And he now goes back to what some people are speculating is he's going to fit into an all-star lineup, maybe join G2. I can't see that happening. The most likely outcome is he ends up with the Finnish guys like Stonda and whoever's left out of that scene, and they probably make a team, get sponsored by one of the old classics like fucking Roccat or someone, and they sort of languish in mid-table obscurity. But anyway, let's talk about this. So, first of all, NIP's good run. Second of all, Arlu leaving NIP.
Yep. I mean, NIP was obviously very good in as much as they beat this new Fnatic in a best of 3, something that no one else has done. So that was sick. They did so. The maps were very weird for that series because it was Cash, Inferno, Cobble. And so Cash, again, is one that, I mean, Nip was able to pick it because this is one where Fnatic themselves, it's a long time since they've been considered really good on that map, but Nip managed a really good win there. Inferno has been a very strong map again for Fnatic. That's become a home map for them. Cobblestone used to be very good for Fnatic guys, but we've seen actually that in recent times, that's not necessarily been a map that they're as strong as the old Fnatic was. So winning there was good. The problem was 2 things happened. One, you got Cobblestone and Cash in the mix. I didn't think you wouldn't be able to get both again the next time. If you play them again in the final, they were not going to let at least one of those maps through, which is what happened. Secondly, Forrest was really, really good. He was excellent. He had an excellent series, but you can't look at the Fnatic side and see that Flusher and Olafmeister went a combined -45 for the series. So Olafmeister was -25 for that series. Now, that's not that's not a legit win. Yeah, it counts as a win, but the point is that's not going to happen all the time, is it? And in fact, if you've seen Olafmeister's form the last few months, he's back to being insane again. And in the final, that was the difference, which is that when they played in the final, Fnatic removed Cobblestone, Fnatic removed Cash, the 2 maps Nip had got the wins on against them. On the other maps, Nip, I feel bad for Nip in that sense. They're the only team I've ever seen in history where they got to the final, and the final had this unique approach that we've never had in double elim tournaments, where you didn't get any game advantage. You never got a 1-map advantage. You never got a series advantage where they had to win 2 off you. What happened was you just got to pick the first map. Now, for every other top elite level team, that would be great. If I was someone like for example, if I was Virtus Pro and I picked Train, now I've got a really good chance of winning my first map outright. You can potentially beat me on it, but I'll very likely win 1-0. All the other top teams would have a map they could pick. Unfortunately, NiP doesn't really play the customs. So they picked Train, hoping it wasn't a good Fnatic map, which was a decent gamble. Problem is they couldn't really go anywhere else. Like I'm trying to think what else they could have actually picked. I mean, the obvious one to me would have been to pick a Cash or a couple. I would have probably tried picking Cash because as you saw, Fnatic removed it. But for whatever reason, NiP tried to pick Train as a gamble. Maybe because they'd seen TSM had lost to Cash and Fnatic. They were really in there was no actual advantage for them basically with the tournament system. That's unfortunate. So aside from that, they just had to play a standard series against Fnatic. And this time around, Crims was pretty good in all the clutches. Olofmeister was the fucking man, just going ham all the time. And this time, Forrest wasn't on fire. He was just okay. No one was terrible on NiP. But the problem is, Olofmeister turned up in God mode. The rest of Fnatic was pretty good, and they got the map pulled back into their favor. So actually, after the pick ban, I made this point. After the pick ban, Henry and Sadikis both picked NiP to win 2-1, actually. And I remember looking at it going, I don't know where you guys are getting this from, because I look at all three of these maps, and I could see Fnatic winning all three. So I thought Fnatic would win 2-0, 2-1. They did win 2-1. In the end, NiP did a good accounting for themselves. This was certainly the continuing on a trend of being pretty decent, if not getting towards being good again. But again, I mean, what's the future for this 5-man lineup? Even if they had kept the same lineup, I don't see how it's going to get that much better. So it probably is time to change players.
Yeah. So what do you think about Arlu heading out then? I mean, just a little bit about sort of his time in NIP, how it's come to an end, what the future holds. I mean, do you feel that Arlu is a star player, for example? And do you think that if he joins a team, he will add that kind of gravitas, that kind of X factor to it and be able to turn them into competitors? Or are we sort of seeing Arlu being cast out into the wasteland now?
No, the problem is there's not that many teams that are options. If he is on a decent enough team, if he was to join a mouse sports type team, he would be a star player. He would be competing for like a top 10 spot in the world. I don't know if he would be in the top 10. There's a lot of good players at the moment, but he would be around that level. So he'd have games that were huge impact games. He could get his team upset wins. The big problem is I don't have a lot of issues with Arlu's time in NiP because on one hand, I don't think they used him very well. I think he did get scapegoated by all the asshole NiP fans who are like, I love everyone who was in original NiP. Fuck every person who joins. I don't like those guys, but I do feel like he was good in NiP. He wasn't at what he could be at his prime, but that's because they didn't use him the right way. They didn't build the team around him. But I don't disagree with him joining NiP because he got to play in 6 finals or something with NiP. So he would have never got that chance if he'd been in some lesser team. He would have been at like Kenny S level where even if you play amazing, you're hoping for a semi-final, maybe the odd final. So he got to accomplish a lot more in his career by being in NiP. He came close to winning a couple of tournaments. He had some great individual games. He at least showed off he had some talent. I hope now eventually he can get onto a good team and just show individually he's a really good player. I think if NiP had used them a different way, it could have been a good addition, but it was never in their mindset to. So I think that's irrelevant. And I think I wouldn't remove him in terms of skill from NiP, but I understand why he's gone on both levels. I still think NiP needs to make more changes than just this, though.
Yeah. Who do you think's coming in then? A lot of people are saying this is Pronax's time to shine. I don't know how I necessarily feel about that. It would be a hell of a fucking story. But yeah, there's a sort of groundswell of bubbling up where people are going, look, this is what needed to happen. Exist, not the strongest in-game leader, never really seemed comfortable playing that role. Pronax, the man who masterminded the original sort of Fnatic dominant era, all the history and rivalry between NIP and Fnatic. You slot Pronax into that team, give Exist this more free role. We all know he can frag. We all know what he's capable of. Maybe we've got another great Swedish team. Now, I'm, again, not saying that is what's happening, not saying that there's even a grain of truth in that, because we all know originally that Pronax was looking at making his own team. But again, hypothetically, do you think that move is a likely one? And if so, do you feel it would be a positive one?
I mean, I don't think it's a likely one, as in unless they go and they offer him like mad money and, you know, somehow they convince him and maybe get right in for us. Like, listen, we've always wanted to play with you, some bullshit like that. If they did, maybe that could win him over. I think it's just the storyline that people are getting hyped on here, because obviously the idea that Fnatic's won all the tournaments without Pronax and now people are like, oh, who cares about that Pronax guy? That's the aspect where maybe the storyline would be cool in an anime sense if they go to the next tournament and suddenly they're like, wait a minute, who is that in Nip's chat? Oh my God, it's Pronax. It's like, now it's time to lead another team. Like, the problem is
the NWO t-shirt is revealed.
Yeah, the problem is that is just like a movie / wrestling storyline. Like, I don't know that it would. Here's the thing. I think it could make Nip better, but put it this way, it wouldn't make Nip into Fnatic. It wouldn't make Nip just suddenly win every tournament in that particular sense. Like, a lot of that was, yeah, maybe Pronax had some really cool calls and really good CT rotations, but he also CT rotated Olofmeister into a site who killed everyone. Like, there has to be a player who's going to do that on Nip, you know. It's not as clear cut as that. And also, we know that the biggest problem in Nip in history is refusal to adapt to the modern strategical meta and to play within certain roles in a team of like, this guy now has to throw a flash instead of just running in. They don't want to do that. Therefore, it's going to be hard to see how Pronax is going to fix that, because he can do the flashes, etc. But other people have to buy into his system, in my philosophy. In fact, that's part of why I think Fnatic had their issues at the end, is that they didn't buy into Pronax's system anymore, and they were just waiting to stop winning enough, which they did eventually happen. They stopped winning, and then they were like, right, now is the time to change players.
Okay. Well, on the note of Fnatic, that's the other talking point. Of course, they won the Fragbite Masters Season 5 finals, beating NIP in that final. And we saw them win DreamHack Winter. We've seen them win this tournament now. It's like nothing has really changed for Fnatic. They're back to winning tournaments. They're back to Olofmeister being just an absolute savage. We've got Dennis, who's in there showing that he's still one of the more skilled players out there, and incredible aggressive style of play. Great to watch. JW has found a new level of consistency these last two tournaments. Flusher's in-game leading so far hasn't really been tested. They've never been in a spot where tactically he's had to think on the fly or anything. So it's still an unknown quantity, but Flusher is, you know, his performance has suffered a little bit, in my opinion, maybe more than a little bit, but certainly he's still making a contribution. And Crims is Mr. Reliable. It's almost as if there was nothing to worry about if you were a Fnatic fan. I think a lot of people felt Pronax going out the door would somehow render Fnatic being it would make them like some tier 2 shit team again, you know. And actually, there's an argument now to say that Fnatic could be in a better position, could be stronger, and could go on and dominate in the same way the old team did. What do you think?
I don't know that they'll dominate in the old way the old team did, because I actually see Fnatic now as a bit more like envious. Like, you see, they go mad for force buys. They buy the OP pistols all the time because, you know, it's Flusher, it's Olofmeister, it's all the people except Pronax. Pronax is the one who comes from the 1.6 mentality of playing the more standard style CS and only mixing that in as like a bit of variety or when you need to get an edge. To me, it looks like they're going to go more towards, they've got the mad skilled lineup and they're going to go envious style where they're going to do crazy force buys and use their skill. The part that you could never have predicted was that Flusher has gotten worse, become the in-game leader. He's not even close to the same. Remember, people were trying to claim he was the best player in the world like 3 months ago. Yeah. The guy who's playing right now wouldn't even be in the top 50 players in the world. But he doesn't need to be. That's what's crazy. Because Dennis hasn't had to do much. He's just come in and be stable. But what's happened is Crims has always been there. Crims is stable. JW's improved and has gotten good now. And even just rifling sometimes. He's added the open again, but it's mostly just rifling. So you've got an increase there to match the Flusher decrease. And now all of us is back to God mode. So now you're back in a position where Fnatic can be like a top 2 team in the world, probably every tournament. But I'm still not entirely sold on the idea that, like, you can just wipe aside Virtus Pro, you can wipe aside Envious. It's just Fnatic all the way here. I think at the moment, as I see it right now, like, I still want to see Fnatic play Virtus Pro again. I want to see them play Envious. I want to see some finals with these teams in. And I want to see scenarios like you're describing here where you're actually in a situation where you have to win 9 T rounds in a row, and it can't just be from doing bullshit force buys and getting headshots with the CZ. You actually have to do it with some tactics and beyond just fragging. So put in that scenario, if they come through, yeah, maybe they can be the next dominant team. Right now, I think that Fnatic and Envious are right there at the top. And then if TSM hadn't fucked up, I would have had TSM and VP just below, but TSM's on the way down. So it's like Fnatic, Envious, and then VP is still the outside shot to win these tournaments, I think.
A little bit of talk about SK, mainly because, you know, Pimps come in. They had a good performance, I guess, at the Fragbite Masters, you know, beating TSM, took a map off Fnatic. You know, there's signs of life there, I guess. I'm still not convinced by the team. I almost feel sorry for Pimp coming in for Cadian. I've said this on stream a few days ago, so it's no secret. This is a team that if you ask on the streets, on the cold streets of Denmark, is this a fun environment to play in? Am I going to have a good time? Is this a cohesive unit? The answer to all of those questions would be a resounding no. And this is why they've had such a revolving door policy. And everyone who has played in this team and has subsequently left has horror stories. They even use one of my trigger words, toxicity, to describe their time within it. And SK Gaming has certainly had some problems. Now, I think they're struggling to get a lineup that's going to work. I think Pimp will definitely help them, but I almost feel that there was nowhere else for Pimp to go at this point. He had to be in a team. He couldn't take any more time out after Dignitas had effectively devalued him by making him take up the AWP in one of the most baffling role swaps, certainly in 2015. So he needed to get back in the team and start proving his worth. I can't believe NA teams passed up on him. I know he was open to playing in NA teams, but this is what he's got. He's got SK Gaming. So the question is, can SK Gaming improve to a significant enough level where they're going to be on that top 10, top 12 radar and attend tournaments and have a significant impact like they did here at the Fragbite Masters?
No. I mean, the team isn't good enough. There's nothing about the team is good enough. The players aren't good enough. They don't have a great in-game leader. They don't have a good team environment. They don't have like the fighting spirit of we're all buds and we're all going to make. They don't have any of that. All it is just literally a last-ditch saloon for a load of players, all of whom, well, not all of them, but a number of whom could one day have a career. Like this Magic Spoy guy seems like he's a rising talent. Still very, very early in his career, though. I wouldn't expect him to do very well in the next 6 months. Modi has always been very skilled, but has one of the most famously toxic players. That's always the rep, at least. I'm not saying it. I haven't played with him. That's the rep, though, that no one wants to play with him. So there's a reason he doesn't get in the top teams. Freeze is a bit of a rager and isn't considered such a smart player, and also his AWPing dropped off quite a lot. Pimp is probably the player most recently who's been the best out of all the players in this team, but obviously he's got no opportunities. He hasn't. NA teams have turned him down who've been available. What's that? Wait a minute, that can't be right, Richard, because since people on Reddit didn't get told by NA teams officially that they turned him down, that can't have happened. And we can't possibly have any information because we don't talk to teams or, you know, get information behind the scenes. Yeah, that's right. So Reddit is correct as usual. Upvote that.
Upvote that, of course. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other stories that are going on. I guess.
Oh, by the way, as a final point, I won't make a massive rant out. Just on exactly that topic of the idea that Alu and Pimp could be picked up by NA teams, but they're not going to be in most cases. Most of the good NA teams won't even consider them. Here's the problem. Every time you fucking cretins with an American flag draped around you and a bald eagle on your shoulder tell me how wonderful ELEAGUE is, go look at ELEAGUE's games in 2015 and find me 5 that are better than the top 5 of Alu's. You'll never find them. Pimp's probably had 15 games that are better than ELEAGUE's best game. I'm talking about on LAN in semis and quarters against the best teams in the world. These guys dwarf the fucks that you guys are dick riding so hard over in NA. Meanwhile, you have all the time in the world for them, but you're like, oh, it wants these used up old EU players. Mate, they're a million times better than the players we're talking about here. Notice I didn't say like Nitro and Hiko's. Those guys have some merit to them. But there's a lot of players where they just don't deserve the rep, but they happen to have been born in America. And that magically gives you some mad privilege with fans that you don't get if you're a really good European player who isn't in a good team right now.
Yeah. Do you know what? I wasn't going to discuss this on the show, because there's other stuff to talk about, but I thought this is a general point. This is Thorin territory, right? And I like to take you into Thorin territory, bring the best out of you, which is sometimes the worst in mankind. But we've seen the North American FACEIT Pro League, and I am fucking bewildered at some of the reactions here. It's a great thing that FACEIT have done. I think FACEIT Pro League's been one of those great developments, a wonderful thing. It's actually got real potential in terms of developing talent, super entertaining, and the NA one is obviously going to be entertaining for many, many reasons. But here's the thing. I remember Simple raging in FACEIT Pro League, and I remember there being threads about it, and I remember people talking about what a fucking piece of shit he was, and no wonder he can't get in the team, and blah, 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 and all of this bullshit, right? And just people castigating him on Reddit all the time. Same for when there was that weird issue where some people got kicked from the FACEIT Pro League, and this was apparently because pro players didn't want to play with them anymore. They felt they weren't good enough. They felt they weren't communicating, and everybody was fucking raging and saying, how dare they do that? What if I was in that? I mean, the people who were obviously offended would never be in that position because they're shit. But obviously, what if I was in that position and I got a chance to play with the pros and then the pros vetoed me? How outrageous is this? So NBK, unfortunately, was put in a position of trying to be spokesperson for something unpopular, and it had been overturned, and he had to come out and basically give some wishy-washy PR answer, and then people are giving him shit, which was ridiculous. So you've got all of this stuff basically about, like, we hold these European pro players up to this unreal standard. Now we've got NA FPL, and I will refer you to an incident where Steel on Cash accidentally team killed Desi with a headshot. He was aiming at a CT coming up highway, and he headshotted him as he pushed out a squeaky. Yeah. Desi went mental for some reason, thinking it would be deliberate. I have no idea why he would have that idea in his head. He calls Steel a faggot and says, I will fucking beat you up at LAN. Like, let's come see me at LAN or whatever. Now, people made a thread about this, massively upvoted, 90% approval on Reddit. Haha, thank you, FPL. This is so entertaining. Man, NAFPL is going to be the best thing to watch on Twitch. Loving all the rage. Ha, ha, ha. So all of this stuff. Then there was even some sort of tangential discussion about Desi owing Steel money, which he's refused to pay back to Steel because Steel threw games. Yeah. Haha, good on Desi. Fuck Steel, right? Now,
it's the morality of the community, mate. Morals only count when it's people you don't like.
Why are NA players, any NA player, being given a pass for behaving in a way that Europeans simply wouldn't be allowed to get away with? And not only that, let's be real. I would love to see a reaction from these. If, let's say you, and I know you would never do this because you're too sensible, but let's say you streamed Counterstrike one day and you headshot someone by accident and they raged at you and you went, fuck you, faggot, I will beat you up at LAN. What do you think happens there? Is it a petition to ban Thorin from the majors? Is it, a letter to Alphadraft, kick him from by the numbers? Like, what ridiculous, overzealous reaction would there be? So why are NA players allowed to do it? Why is it funny? Like, do we hold NA players to such a ridiculously low standard? Is that what it is? Can you explain it to me?
I mean, here's the big issue, if we're being real. It is funny. That's hilarious that he called him a faggot. He probably is, in the context of what that guy means by a faggot, which has nothing to do with homosexuality, a faggot. That seems perfectly legit. Also, it's hilarious that Desi would say beat him up, because Desi is a fucking matchstick who better watch when the fucking subway doors close. Never mind having a fight with someone, mate. You might blow away and get killed. So forget about that. Secondly, in reality, it should be okay for everyone to do this. People are goofing off. They're fucking around. I mean, yeah, it's not so great if you're supposed to be pros and you're trying to improve as players, but that's irrelevant. It is supposed to be entertainment, right? The bigger issue to me here is, you want to know the real reason I would suggest, Rich, as to why people get mad at the Europeans for this? Because NA are the most insecure region in any game I've ever experienced. What happens is, I've always said this before, if NA is on top, then if you say anything, they go, ha, stop crying, faggot, I am wrecking you, ha, you are shit. But then if NA isn't on top, they go, well, stop mentioning it. Why do you have to keep mentioning that we didn't win the tournament? Why do you have to keep saying Fnatic was #1 just because they won all the tournaments? Why can't you say that Cloud9 did well and was quite good? Like, they're so insecure. And so what happens is, anytime a European does it, that's the get out. Ah, right, that's it. What happens is we're not as good at skill wise, but that's because we're not toxic assholes who are totally socially retarded and have to be. We're just good guys who, we just haven't quite got the things together and the confidence and the infrastructure. They did the same in StarCraft and League of Legends, Rich. What they would try to push, Western fans constantly tried to push this mad narrative that Koreans are only good because they don't have souls. They're little robot insects who sit there doing whatever the hive tells them to do, just doing 17 actions a second. Or I guess it would have to be like 200 actions a second, constantly just doing the same thing over and over. And that's how they become good, just following the little ant path. Meanwhile, even the crappiest NA pro was some like deep, unique individual thinker who'd followed his own life and drove a Harley Davidson and was an artist and who let the game speak through him. And that's why he tried this really incredible, innovative stuff that didn't work, didn't win the game, but they were at least like a real person who was trying. They had to put some mad storyline like that just so that they didn't feel insecure for being a bunch of shitters at fucking video games made in their own country.
I mean, I think the one I always liked the best was when you would hear from NA players going like, it's not my whole life, brah. It's not my whole life. It's not my whole life. I don't need it, man.
Nah, mate, it's a hobby and you shit at it. Now get the fuck out my face. Go back to Lilith.
You hear it all the time. You'd be like, I got a girlfriend. I got a girlfriend, yeah. I go to the gym, yeah. All right, what? No one else in the world does that shit? Like, no one in EU has a girlfriend. No one in EU knows what a gym is. Like, no one in Korea goes to the gym or has, like, what the fuck? And you're right, man. This narrative is peddled that it's like, you know, NA has the work-life balance right. And if everyone else would just fall in line with the NA values, they would come out at the forefront. But you've got the robotic Koreans, and then you've got this, like, infrastructure in Europe that gives us all this head start. And NA are just up against it.
Oh,
man.
Rich,
Blue-collar
have you ever heard this one? This is my favorite one ever. They really believe that the reason why Europeans are better is because, yeah, like you're saying here, Europeans are losers and just sit in the house all day playing. Yeah. Here's a better one. They think, because again, to every American, Europe is one big city that looks like Paris. They don't realize it's a place with like 100 countries or something insane, right? So you go to Europe, think about all the dog shit places that have no sponsors, no infrastructure, like Ukraine, Belarus, that are churning out players, Poland, that are bodying NA players, have none of the advantages. But no, what they do is they bill it that every single country in Europe is Denmark and has some amazing socialist system where the government actually doesn't just say, like, if you don't work, we'll pay you a little bit of money. They say, no, actually take 2,000 euros a month and stay at home and please do play video games all day. Unlike that NA guy who's like really blue collar guy, grafting at the building site, then coming home, putting down his steroids a second, putting on his blue sort of wife beater and starting to play some video games. And he's just banging them off. But hey, listen, everyone can wear wife beaters, Rich, and they can all choose.
Can you carry the show a minute? There's actually someone at my door. This never happens, and I'm home alone. One second.
Okay. Imagine how sad it'll be if you just hear a gun now, like, and he's just killed.
Get a lot of views though, man. Might be worth it.
Is this still on now?
Yeah, it's still live, of course.
Okay, fair enough. Right. It would be amazing if you just heard, "Are you Richard Lewis?" Lord, this big guy just blew him through the wall completely.
There's no way I could have cut it.
And then it's Admirable Bulldog when he walks in. He just goes, "You're fucking with my brother." Oh, that's not it. It's not even Swedish, man. I'm doing my best. Do my best. He comes in. No, here's the genius. He comes in with an old Wild Western revolver and blows Richard's heads off.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the storyline for the show.
Is he coming back? Oh,
I
like that.
Sorry about that, buddy. What have you been saying? What have I missed?
I'm just hoping that whoever was at the door was like Admirable Bulldog from Alliance and he killed you with a revolver.
It wasn't. It's the fucking the delivery that I get is like an hour early. I get like all my
the heroin that gets you through the day.
Yeah, if you follow me. My delivery of where I'm spending my 6 griller. So anyway, where was I going with this? Fuck knows. Anyway, I think the point we can all agree on is that the NA teams are held to, or just NA players are just held to like this completely different standard. I think it's completely fucking unrealistic. I have no idea why we would hate on the Europeans and make their lives more miserable. Meanwhile, we're actually going to let the North American players kind of just get away with like this free pass to act however they want. There's even allegations that people are dodging queues and stuff. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence to this, but this is what people are saying, that they're dodging queues when they're getting unfavorable matchups to try and game the system. Like the Americans.
I couldn't imagine Americans would do something like that, Richard. They seem like a very moral country who only do things by the book.
Yeah, exactly. No, but the idea, of fucking, just that everyone else in FPL was just like, oh, hey, this is pretty cool. Like in Europe, I mean, hey, this is cool. What a nice thing. We can do this. It's going to be broadcast. It's a bit of fun. There's money to be won. We're bringing in new players. We're meeting new people. We're breaking down boundaries between the teams. This is awesome. American players, how the fuck can I gain this system to win some cash? Like, is this real?
No, listen, FPL is a great idea. The North American FPL is a really great idea, well implemented. Problem is, it's full of North Americans.
Well, last time we went down this road talking about a country, you got into a lot of trouble. So I don't want to have that happen again. Being banned from NA would certainly be a bit more catastrophic than anywhere else. So let's talk about some of the other news that's been going on. We just had this announced literally before we went on air, so I haven't had a lot of time to look at it, but I think this is definitely worth talking about. So Valve have announced that alongside the majors, we're now going to have minors, regional minors, which are going to be tournaments which will start in January, and it's going to give lesser known teams an opportunity to basically be noticed and get into qualifiers for other bigger tournaments. And these are going to be run by StarLadder in the CIS region. Europe will be handled by PGL. Asia, which is super interesting that's there, is going to be handled by ESL. And obviously MLG will be handling America. So I won't get too much into the minutiae talking about the format and stuff. But basically, it's going to be qualifiers to get to the final of the minors, and there's going to be 128 teams. They'll have a $50,000 prize pool. So this is actually, I think, a very good thing for grassroots Counterstrike. Your thoughts?
I think it is good. Like, one thing that's key in terms of the wording that I hope this is what it means is that even though these are set spots, so someone from CIS will qualify, they only qualify to the offline qualifier. So again, we won't have the scenario we had at ESL One Cologne last year where teams just qualified because they were the second best Oceanic/Asian team. Hopefully it means they go to the offline qualifier, and if they're not good enough, they just lose to whoever's good, and that's how we get the qualifier overall. That's good. I like the idea of the tournaments. There is one quibble, though, which does seem to have been overlooked that Pimp has brought up on Twitter, which is that apparently you're not allowed to play if you were a challenger or a legend in one of the past tournaments in this minor, because their logic is they're thinking all the teams here are going to be newer teams. What they're not realizing is if you've been kicked from a challenger or legend team, you are now fucked, essentially, because you can't compete in this minor. So hopefully that can be ironed out, because that's obviously a big problem if it means people like Pimp just can't even qualify.
Big show, of course. Not going again, mate, just in case something happens. We need to at least stream it. Fritchard gets killed live on air.
Just keep going. Again, though, look, that exercise bike in the background.
Never seen it anywhere.
Put it this way, if a pervert came in here, he'd go over, smell that seat and go, this doesn't even smell of anything. There's no sweat on it. He wouldn't even be able to enjoy it.
Well. Just obviously the weights right behind the chair.
Yeah, I'm lifting big weights, mate. Big weights.
What you can't see is just the stacks of plates to the left. Yeah, I'm on a juice cleanse. Oh, that's what this delivery probably is, actually. It's probably food.
It probably is. It's probably just like a mad Indian or something, isn't it?
He's had to come twice. You've ordered so much food, we have to do 2 trips, mate. This is unreal.
Oh, is he come back? Maybe it's like some gross gore shit. Someone's actually ordered a prostitute, but Richard's just like, yep, same time as usual upstairs. She's like, it's the first time I've come. Yeah, they send a different girl every time. Sorry. And then his real girl that he ordered has come now. He's like, 2 of you? Well, I guess, I did have that energy drink earlier on, so you can go upstairs as well. Meet Linda.
This is unreal. I'm just going to sit here.
But Mr. Richard, why you order me to the...
What's that, mate? What am I missing?
Just wondering what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. So just I don't know. I booked a delivery for exactly 10 o'clock when the show was going to finish.
Yep, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, and they've come an hour early, and obviously I'm home alone when I'm doing the shows because I don't like to annoy.
Why has it been 2 deliveries, mate? How much food you've ordered?
No, because he fucking locked himself out. The delivery dude. I said just leave it out there and open the door. right, and leave it ajar and just bring it in because I'm doing something. And then he locked himself out and he's been ringing my phone and stuff. It's a farce. This is.
Ask him if he's ever played NAFPL. I think he'd fit right in.
Bring him in. See what I mean? So anyway, yeah, hopefully the absurdity's at an end now. But maybe not. We'll wait and see. Anyway, so yeah, I think the pimp problem that gets brought up is pretty spot on, you know, because you can't predict if your career is going to hit the fucking skids or not, right? You could be a major today, dog shit tomorrow, you know, anything can happen. And the idea that a minor, which is here to promote lesser known teams, we're not talking about players, we're talking about teams. If they manage to attract someone of that caliber to the team, then that organization should have an opportunity to be in the minors. I guess, though, it could go too far. You could get people like NA organizations, for example, paying well over the odds to bring in an all-star team into a shit organization and clean up and win a minor. So I think you have to find a balancing act. I don't know. Would you put maybe a cap on how many players you could have that have played in a major, like maybe 2 per team or something?
Yeah, and there's a ways around it. Okay, so maybe there's something like this. You can only have 1 or 2. On top of that, they can't then play in your minor qualifier, then suddenly turn up at the major in a different team, you know, something like that. Just because presumably this is to stop like people standing in, like Guardian just goes, oh, okay, I'll come with you guys who are from Czech Republic or whatever. I mean, he already has more like Slovakia or something, but whatever. He comes with some team and he just plays with his mates and helps them qualify, then goes off and plays with Navi. We don't want that. I agree. But there's ways around these things where if you put in the right kind of rules and clauses, you'll be able to stop that happening without screwing over the pimp and bolts of this world.
Don't want to screw over the pimps of this world. Definitely don't want to do that. So let's jump into final other couple of bits of news, and then I guess I'll let you go, and I'll deal with the catastrophe that's occurring in my flat. I think this is a big deal. Obviously, we saw Turner. They've announced that they're going to be doing an event at the Consumer Electronics Show, which is in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's going to be on January the 7th, and they're partnering up with FACEIT to do it. And it's going to be like a precursor to the ELEAGUE. Now, we also had the ELEAGUE announcement, which was $1.2 million of prize money per season. Season will last 10 weeks, as we've established, and will be broadcast on the Turner network. And
I've got one question quickly for you, Rich.
Yeah, sure, dude.
If you were going to announce a $1.2 million televised league, how do you fuck up the announcement so that you don't specify it's per season? How does that go out without someone noticing that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they felt it was implied. I mean, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's $1.2 million dollars a season. Like, of course it's per season. What else would it be? And then people started saying, well, you know, I saw like Lurpus tweeting saying, well, it's only slightly more than the ESL ESEA Pro League. What's the point of that? And I was like, hang on a minute. Do these people know something I don't?
It's because they did say there were 2 seasons. So again, what I don't get is why not say we've got a first season coming up and there's another one coming, or why not say 2.4 million? Like, I don't get it. You could actually big the number up, couldn't you? They've done the opposite to not big the number up.
Maybe they're a bit apprehensive about doing that, you know? Like maybe they think people will think they're selling them a load of fucking jive. I don't know, but you're right. It was weird that it needed clarification. But certainly the clarification brings us good news, and that is that it's a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, first of all, I guess I should ask about, do you think it's too much? Because obviously, yeah, I know obviously this is a hard concept for you, Duncan, but let's
thought about that.
I'm sure you didn't, but let's remember that we're dealing with an ecosystem here. And people criticize the majors, saying you only get $250,000 per major and it should be increased. And I actually agree that it should be larger. And people are saying, well, if you've got a $1.2 million league, it makes the majors look bad. And maybe people don't want to even be in the majors. Maybe they prioritize the Turner League over already being in a major. There'll never be a situation that comes up where that'll be an option, because obviously Valve have worked on this Turner League. You know, they've got to give their blessing that they're very au fait with what's going on. But if it's too much money, then, and we accept that as a premise, I mean, and we, you know, does it overshadow the majors? Would we need to see an increase in the majors?
I mean, in terms of prize money, it does. Yeah. I mean, this is way more than the majors. And hopefully that kicks Valve up the arse and realizes whatever, again, they're fucking around with behind the scenes where they don't explain the reasons for why it's 250K. They'll either have to do so or they'll have to pump it up. Otherwise, they'll look silly. With that said, it will only be in terms of prize money. Like, for example, if at the end of the year I break down, you know, this is how much one team won and another one. If you look and you see a team that seems way higher than they should be, they're probably because they did really well in this tournament. Now, with that said, these tournaments will never be as big a deal as the majors, because the majors, in theory, as we saw the last few, have every good team, and because they take place over a week, will always be more exciting and vibrant and effective at showing who's the best than a league. So I think there will always be that advantage for Valve's majors, that they will always be the best in that sense. But I do think the prize money issue is going to become a problem for Valve if they just stick with this 250K for no reason and don't ever improve it.
And of course, let's not forget the sticker money, which is a factor, right? I mean, it kind of gets overlooked that because we look at the number of, you know, $250,000 and we're like, God, that's such a small number when you compare it to all these other prizes and stuff. But the sticker money was 4.2 million distributed by the teams that sort of took place in the major. So I mean, that's obviously that's a much bigger amount of money if you look at it that way. And I don't know necessarily. I mean, I think prize money, yeah, to the victor the spoils, but equally you can have one bad tournament and the organization has to still keep ticking. The salaries still have to get paid, and if you've got a lot of fans that are willing to buy virtual merchandise and put money into you, I still think, you know, that's something that can't be overlooked. Now, I don't know if we'll see anything like drops or stickers or anything in line with the Turner League, but I do think people overlook the sticker money quite a lot in Counterstrike.
Yeah, but the problem is, from what I remember, I think if you finished something like 8th at the international or in like a major in Dota, you got like basically as much as someone who wins a CSGO major. In fact, I think it's if you finished 8th in the recent Frankfurt major in Dota 2, you got $100,000. So that means just finishing 8th gets you that much. Well, okay, let's say for stickers, someone who finishes 8th gets way more. That's only if they're a really big and loved team. So again, you're confusing popularity with competition. So I don't know why the two are connected. Like, I never have understood why people are like, why don't you include sticker money into prize money? Because they're two fundamentally different things, mate. If my granddad gives me money and I make money off my salary, we don't count them both as my salary for very good reasons. And you don't just go, well, your boss shouldn't have to pay you more, Sully, because I know, Benson, that your granddad's giving you more. That's irrelevant, mate. You pay me based on the work I'm doing. So likewise, if you're a really good team, I would hope you get a lot of prize money. Then, yeah, why not have both? Have sticker money on top of it, and we'll have a really good situation for everyone.
Okay, a couple of other news hits. Actually, no, because we didn't even get around to the Vegas event. So obviously the Vegas event is going to be a precursor and it's going to be partnered up with FACEIT. I don't think they've announced who's going to be working it, but the fact that it's FACEIT, we can presume the FACEIT stable of talent will be involved, which I think is great. I mean, what do you think of this idea of having a precursor? I'm guessing this is to maybe sell the idea to some of the TV people. Maybe it'll get recorded as a pilot, you know? What do you think overall about this?
That was my logic. I thought, first of all, it's like a dry run. You get to see all the production stuff. Does it work, etc. Secondly, it wasn't announced that it's actually at like an electronic show or whatever. So it's a way to kind of show other people in the industry. Maybe you want to get sponsors one day. You know, we're a TV station, but we're coming in with this big league. Get on board now. It's still time, you know. Then thirdly, it's the idea that like you can sort of test out what could go wrong in a way. I mean, it's only one match or something, but you could still sort of test out some of the aspects of like, how would production work exactly? When would we bring the analysts in? What do people like? You know, Americans love to do all that shit with pilots where they have like test audiences and all that sort of thing. I will say, by the way, I can't reveal any details, but I talked to some people behind the scenes who sort of, I'll just say, suggested some aspects of how the league might run in terms of the format and stuff like that. And anyone who knows me knows I'm not a fan of leagues because I don't like the fact that they're so drawn out and that games don't mean that much week to week, you know? And like, for example, if you win a big game over someone in week 2, as long as you overtake them in the standings, that won't matter in week 11 when you play them the second time. It doesn't have the same storyline as in a big tournament. But the things I've heard are very positive, actually. They've figured out a way to do this as a league that has components of what I like about tournaments without ruining their own league concept as well. So it's actually, as far as I can tell, it's actually probably one of the better ideas I could hear of in terms of doing a league. Because for me, most of my ideas would be don't do a league, just do like 7 tournaments or just do a tournament in this country, you know. So bearing in mind they're not going to go that route, it does sound like it's a lot better than people might have been worried about. It's not going to be just some shit league where TSM plays once every 2 weeks and then they add the tally up at the end of the season and whoever goes to the playoffs goes. It's not going to be like that as far as I've heard. So I think there's some positive things behind the scenes in that respect.
So last 2 bits of news. Oh, no, actually, we'll do it. We'll do this. It's not really a big deal. Obviously, the ESL One Cologne got announced, $250,000. It's going to be in July. It's going to be at the Lanxess Arena again. Which was a great venue actually. I went there as just a spectator, had a great time. Thought it represented pretty good value for money actually. When you consider the people who got the kind of VIP tickets, they got like 3 meals a day, infinite beer. So yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, other than that, I don't really think there's a lot to say about it, but we don't know if it's going to be a major or not. That's the only really talking point. What do you think?
I suspect it will be. Like, I suspect Valve still want to work with ESL. That's the one that broke the records. It would be the obvious one where you could get any pleb guy on a board to think, oh, well, if that broke the records, let's do it there again. So I think it probably will be. It's a good venue. So probably should be a major. Don't, though, if you're someone in the public, think the fact it's 250K means it definitely will. Because from the things I've heard, next year we'll have an unreal amount of 250K tournaments. Like, I'm not exaggerating. We might get, okay, this year I think we had, let me see, we did 3 majors. I think we might have had 6. This might be the 7th now with 250K. I think we're going to get to 10 easily next year, 250K tournaments, if not more. And I'm not counting the Eternal League in that, by the way. So
of course not. No.
The level's going to be raised in that sense. So I think it would be good if it was a major. If it isn't, it won't matter. It'll still be. In fact, if anything, here's the funny thing. I'll kind of make one of ESL's points for themselves that they tried to make in a slimy way about I Am Kavitse. If it's not a major, it'll probably be a better tournament, because then they can actually run it with their own format without random map pick and have a best of 5 final. So in a way, you should almost hope it isn't the major, but I suspect it will be the major.
So get rid of that. Then there's some teams. You'll like this, Duncan. Old school people coming back. We had this. It's getting tedious now, the MTW thing. I think this is one of
just the fact you drag it out this long.
Yeah, like come the fuck on. Like, it would have been just a big deal if you just announced the 5.
That would be cool, right?
Yeah, we brought them back, baby. But like, actually, any goodwill I would have towards either this organization, which let's not forget, towards MTW's end, their demise, they were a piece of shit organization who fucking robbed people blind, withheld money from players, and actually turfed one player out on the fucking streets. That was Steel, who had to come and stay at my house. That was the back end of the MTW dream. So the brand was tainted, poisoned. Obviously, I don't know who's going to be involved. I think it's under new ownership. I mean, whatever. There was some dodgy story about them. They were talking about how Spawn was maybe going to come back for them, and Spawn was like, "What the fuck? No." So I mean, I'm not 100% sold on this. But then, anyway, this is like the most ill-advised fucking PR move I've ever seen. Like, hey, we've got Minute, we've got Sunday. Yeah, the rest, is it just that lineup, is it, mate? Is it just that fucking lineup? Can you just say it's that lineup?
It is, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, can you just do that, like? And now it's like, who will the 5th be? Well, it's Sonic, isn't it? It's fucking, of course it's Sonic.
It's like the shittest advent calendar ever, because all you get is some mega old washed up player who's only coming back for money and might not even continue on for 6 months if your deal disappears.
Yeah.
Who's behind the next door?
Yeah. Oh, it's that old cunt. Brilliant. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's blown my mind, because here's the thing. If they'd announced that 5, I'd have been excited. I loved watching these guys in 1.6. I remember it was at, I think it was DreamHack Winter, that final they had against Na'Vi was fucking just incredible. Like, it was one of the most intense atmospheres. It was in that like dream arena. It was packed to the rafters. Really, really good stuff. So I obviously love these guys, but this is kind of like, oh, come on, because they're not even going to be that great to begin with. Let's be real.
No,
you know, you're coming out of retirement, you're getting into CSGO. Like, God knows how much you've played. God knows how much Counterstrike you've played, even any version, let alone CSGO and the form it's in now. So yeah, I don't know about it, but like, just please, just a word of advice for any fucking team in the future. If you're bringing back some old school and beloved lineup, don't introduce them one at a fucking time. We get the message. If it's going to be one player, do that by all means. Even give him a separate introduction to the rest of the team he's going to be playing in. That's fair enough. Legends earn that. Don't do this like one at a time. What's it going to be? Just fuck off. Don't. But I'm guessing you don't think the team will do very well.
I mean, bearing in mind they were a great team and they did have one of the best minds of the game and they had one of the best players in Trace. There's a chance, a very slim chance, that if everything went amazingly, they could be good. But put it this way, here's the overriding thing I would say. No team came into CSGO with a full lineup from 1.6 and was ever good. It never happened. Na'Vi got like vaguely there, and even then immediately disbanded. And like two of the players went in Astar and Dragon's. Like, nobody managed to become the best with that sort of lineup. That was in the least competitive era. In the most competitive era, you're not going to do it. And part of the reason why is, even if, say, 2 of the 3 of the guys get really good and adapt to the game, well, the other 2 guys are just there because they used to be with you in 1.6. They haven't got there on their own merits. So they might dick around. They might never be good. They might never try as much. They might never be as dedicated. So to me, it only makes sense as a starting place. Do it for the pop of the PR and the nostalgia and the gimmick of doing it as this team. But then as soon as people start to get good, kick the ones who aren't out and get in the players who are good and just make a real team. At that point, that's the only way you can get good, basically. And you're not going to get good as this team, I don't think.
And the final bit of news, while we're on this, and I imagine this might stir some strong feelings from you, so I think it's a good part to end the show on. So Millennium, they're back. They're coming back into CSGO, and you know, they're a well-known French organization, but they haven't had a CSGO team for a while. Well, they've announced that they're back, and of course, it's got Sixer, who was you know, a beast. You got Major in there as well, and perhaps the more interesting part of it is FACEIT is back following the match fixing scandal with his old Epsilon team. So this is a European player who is suspended from all Valve sponsored events, and yet he's been brought into a team. And I don't know, there seems to be this weird air about it where people are saying, hey, we're going to review. Maybe his ban will get reviewed in 2016. Now, I will say this. If his ban gets reviewed, and yet we're having a standpoint of the iBuyPower guys, they've got an indefinite ban and we're not going to review the decision. Now, obviously, Valve have not said anything about this. And I imagine Valve are going to be consistent. This is other people speculating. And indeed, I imagine Millennium speculating. But that would be an absolute travesty. So just some thoughts, first of all, about this team. And, you know, just some thoughts about the FACEIT situation.
Yeah, I mean, the FACEIT one, here's one of the problems I have with the whole scenario, right? That the idea that the reason the iBuyPower guys got banned even more so, what people tried to do, which I think is really unfair, is compare it to when you're in a courtroom scenario and you don't show remorse and the judge can be even stern on you. They weren't. They hadn't yet in any way been tried in any way where you know that like it's very likely you're going to be found guilty. Because the idea is at that point, if you don't show remorse, you're almost like you don't give a crap about your crimes and you think it's perfectly fine and fuck society. That's why we're so harsh there. It's true, they had been mildly pinned down on the original story, but as we've gone to lengths on this show to mention in the past, until extra information like circumstantial evidence came about, odds were they never would be caught. They never would have been actually like tried or done. And if they had, it would have been in a much minor way. So I can't really hold that against them that much. I actually think it's almost basic human instinct and self-preservation to not just give up when you have a chance to get out and just roll over and die. Like if any of you guys saying you do that, that's because you're probably the sort of pussies who just accept shit going the way that it does. And you would literally like bootlick and goose step to Hitler. There we go. There's the analogy. But in terms of this scenario, yeah, I do think FACEIT should be in the same boat as the others. So if they can't get unbanned, I'm not sure why he would get unbanned. It seems dodgy there. I can see why they brought him in this team, though, because he's the only player in this team who's been decent in CSGO. So it's a way to help the others get to a decent level, hopefully. He was a talent. He was clearly a decent player when he played in that Epsilon lineup. But he had this rep also of like a simple type rager guy who no one wanted to play with and was really hard to work with. So that's a problem. Sixer was a really good 1.6 player. Unfortunately, he was one of those guys where I can't quite tell if it was something in him or just the teams he played for. Because admittedly, the French team wasn't very good in the latter years because everyone had gone to Source. That he never really got any good accomplishments. So despite being quite a skilled player and all the top players knew he was good, he never actually had like big placings in all the tournaments that like people of that skill level are usually expected to. So he's good. I'd like to see him play 1.6 CSGO, rather see what it'd be like. Major was like a decent player. He had good aim. He was more sort of like a screen player in 1.6, like had some sick highlights, but never was like a godly player or whatever. The rest of them I've barely even heard of. Like I vaguely recognize some of their names, but they haven't done much. So I don't imagine we'll expect much from the team, especially if they can't take FACEIT to majors. But maybe they can go to some of these small tournaments. Obviously, not the minor one you just announced before because it's a Valve tournament again. And maybe some of the players can show themselves to be decent. Again, for most of these teams, none of them are going to be announced, rise to the top as a fivesome and get really good. Odds are, if anyone gets good, they're going to be picked apart by the better teams, as you would expect. That's the way the ecosystem should work.
Yeah. So there we go. That's it from me. I haven't got any other stories. I think that's worth debating. I don't know if you do. Did anything leap out at you this week that I
think
missed?
We covered a lot.
Yeah, as always, mate. As always.
Oh, by the way,
yeah.
Just as a little teaser, I won't say who, but we actually might have a guest on next week's episode. I don't know if you saw.
Oh shit! Yeah, we will.
People will like it, I think.
Yeah,
one-time guest.
Yeah, we've never done a guest before on By the Numbers, and despite the fact that our ratings are going up, this is like a great number of people watching the show live. The people at Alphadraft are like, the package is getting a little bit stale. We just need to, throw in a curveball. So we're bringing on a guest, and I think it's going to add a creamy level of sophistication to the proceedings, which I'm looking forward to.
That's about as subtle as the TSM players suggesting what org they're going to next week.
Yeah, I know. I thought so. I thought, fuck it. Like, why are we?
You're going to be an MTW PR by the end of the night.
Yeah, no, but it's the point, isn't it? Like, why are we even teasing it? I'm just going on a massive rant about shit teasers.
It's true. It's true. To be fair, it wasn't literally on Twitter. He didn't even. Here's the thing. He didn't even DM me and ask. He just said on Twitter, and I was like, "Yeah, I reckon you could." So actually, it's on my Twitter. I guess it's who it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why are we even teasing this out? I don't know what's wrong.
Who knows, guys? Who could?
Yeah, who knows who it will be
on MTW's new talk show? By the Numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
tune in next week.
Tune in next week when you'll see Sonic. But anyway, so look, of course. Thanks to everyone who watched today. Thanks to Sam for producing the show. Thanks to Duncan for being an awesome co-host. And, of course, all that remains to be said is thanks to Alphadraft, who once again, despite the introduction of our surprise guest, have allowed us to go absolutely ham on the show and just let us sort of take over and do whatever we want and say whatever we want, including terrible analogies about school shootings, it seems. Will this be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Will the Skrilla dry up? We don't know. But if you don't want it to be, you need to go and support alphadraft.com. It's the only way you can save our souls and our futures. So go to the website, register. You can do fantasy draft picking there for tournaments. There's free games. There's games you have to play to go in. And if you're smart like what we are, you can win lots of cash. How was that one, Duncan? Was that on your level of plug?
That wasn't bad.
Well,
you implied that the audience is smart. I usually go the other route and just make them plebs and try and beat them down so the confidence is so low. They feel like, well, what could I do with my worthless stuff? I go, you can at least play Alphadraft, I guess. And they go, yeah, I guess that's all I could do.
Yeah. So, so without any further ado, that's us for another week. Oh, shit, I haven't even brought this up. Are we doing like a Christmas special or anything?
What does that involve?
I don't even know. Like we wear Santa hats. I don't know.
If Alphadraft sends me a Santa hat, okay, I'll wear it.
I don't even know, but yeah, it's just getting close to Christmas, man. People have shit to do, so I'm guessing we're going to stick to a regular schedule. We'll find out anyway. We'll cross that bridge. We've got our secret guest show to get through first. So without any further ado, we will see you next week. Thanks a lot for watching, and until then, may all your drafts be alpha. Peace.